Shake a sugar shaker, what a thrill. Jeepers, I'm a sugar pill. Shake a sugar shaker, you can too. Sugar pills will work for you. Shake a sugar shaker, what a thrill. Jeepers, I'm a sugar pill. Shake a sugar shaker, you can too. Sugar pills will work for you. Hello everybody and welcome to the Sugar Pill Show. I'm Barbara Baxter and today I have a great guest named Helene Apke. Helene is a house manager of a noteworthy individual. She does Colonel D's gourmet herb and spice production. She has been a customer service rep of the Custom Group and Jeff Thomas Catering, an executive assistant for North American Properties. She enjoys gardening. She has over 1,000 recipes for apples. She says she was a very heavy child, and she is now a very slim, grown-up lady. She liked to ride horses when she was young, and she got hit on the head at a track meet by Bruce Jenner, who was holding his track meet pole. She's a wife. She's a mother. She has 2 sons. One of her sons is missing. She's going to talk to us today about what happens to the family, to your friends, with the authorities when you have a missing child. And she's here to help others know how she's been able to cope, how her family's been able to cope, and to help any of you out there who are in the same situation to cope. Welcome, Helene. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Barbara. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm glad you're here. And you were a heavy child, really? I mean, you're a very slim person right now.
Thank you. I've worked at it. Worked at it hard. And when you're married to somebody 6'9", you know, they're thin. So you kind of have to, you know,
your husband's 6'9". How tall are you?
I am 5'2".
5'2".
Eyes of blue.
Eyes of blue. Okay, I love it. And you grew up in really what we would call a fairly normal life. You lived in Kirkland, Ohio, which is the headquarters of the Latter-day Saints movement and the Herb Society of America. Now tell us a little bit about when you were growing up.
Well, we grew up in the country, 25 miles east of Cleveland, actually. I had an older brother. Chris was 2.5 years older, and a younger brother, Richie, and was 5 years younger. Spent most of our time, because we lived in the snow belt, you know, out in the snow, sledding, hiking, just doing all the things that normal people would do. As moved from the Cleveland area to the Chicago area as a senior in high school, so I was kind of a little jolt of, you know, it was just an adjustment to go from country living to city living.
Country to city, yes.
But other than that, you know, normal, on to college. And
so you went to a public or a private elementary school?
I went to parochial school all through college.
Okay. And high school, parochial?
Yes.
And where was your college?
It's Marion College in Indianapolis, and it is currently, they've become Marion University.
Okay, that's a good school.
It's a great school. They have one of the world-class cycling teams.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. That just popped into my head, but that's one of the things they're noted for.
You told me when we were talking a little bit before the show that your major was being a dietitian.
Correct.
What does that mean? I mean,
well, dietetics encompasses, and if you were in a hospital back, and I'm going to say in the day, but about 40 years ago, dietitians, but still today, in a hospital, a nursing home, they regulate the diets for people who have any kind of health issue, you know, nutrition, dietetics, creating recipes for people who have diabetes, heart conditions. So that's
okay.
It kind of follows more into the medical side of things.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is your major was dietetics, I'm sorry, and you grew up in a city that was the Herb Society of America. You worked for Colonel D's Urban Spice Productions, and you have recipes for 1,000 apple dishes, and so you're sort of connected with this food thing.
Sounds like it. You've kind of brought that to my attention, that it all kind of connects. Yeah, I think we're
all
led.
Connects.
I think life leads you, you
yes.
know, so somewhere, you know, in my inner sanctum, I knew I guess that I was supposed to.
favorite apple recipe?
Well, we call it apple. It's escalloped apples or scalloped apples. Most of my friends like to call my stuff apple crap.
Okay. Scalloped apples. I'm sure it's delicious.
They don't mean it that in a bad way. It's
No.
just they know if Helene, you're bringing something, you need to bring
Well,
something made with apples. So scalloped apples is my favorite.
Great. So here you are with, your interest in cooking, and you're majoring in nutrition, and you met a man and fell in love, and you got married.
And we got married.
You got married and had 2 children, and one of Helene's children is missing. And she's going to tell us how that happened. So, Helene, what can you tell us?
Jeff had just turned, his name is Jeff to most people. He was 24 years old, and what we know is that he had a car, there was a car that he was in was found on the bridge between Lawrenceburg and Petersburg, and no one's seen him since. So we really don't have any details.
Was the car?
It had been wrecked.
It was a wreck. Okay.
No one's sure if he was actually it was wrecked into the bridge abutment or if the tires had been blown on it. So they're not sure if maybe that happened first, but there's no concrete proof of which happened first. So
and I want to say to people directly that because Helene's son was 24, it doesn't mean that he is not a missing child. As those of us know who have children who are older, they're always our children. And it doesn't mean a child that is under the age of 20. At 24, your child was missing.
correct.
And one of the things that happened was some time lapsed before you took some steps that you wish you'd been able to take earlier. Can you explain that to us?
Well, we initially didn't. Being that he was 24 years old, you don't keep tabs on him like you would a young child every second that they're not around. And it was about 3 days before we found out about the car, which then led us to realize that something might have happened to Jeff. But then we still thought, well, maybe he's just. It kind of goes to the back of your
Somewhere
mind and
else,
something.
yeah.
And he didn't get too concerned until probably 10 days later. The most important thing, if you even think that there might have been something that happened to a person, whether it be a child or an adult, is to contact the authorities. I think most people have seen stories on TV where the first 48 hours are critical.
So if your child is older, and you're thinking, well, at 24, he may be with his friends or whatever. It's not like he has to check in all the time. What would make you say, okay, it's been 48 hours? I mean, how does a person know when they have an older child to start thinking, maybe I should call somebody?
Well, it was his friends who kind of prompted the friends that you would have thought, well, gee, maybe that's where he was, or he was with some friends and he just wasn't communicating or whatever. When his friends were expressing an interest in wanting to know where he was, and we haven't seen him, and that's unusual. In his case, that was extremely unusual for somebody not to have seen him for several days, and so we contacted the authorities.
And I think it speaks very highly of you and your husband. The friends certainly knew you all well enough, so you must have been you can bring your friends over, to our home. You knew who these friends were, so they took the liberty of calling you and your husband and saying, well, where is Joff? We haven't seen him.
Right.
So that's an important thing to remember. If you think your child is missing, older adult or younger, and the friends start saying, where is he or where is she? That's a real big clue. And I know that because you have talked to me about this, one of the big advantages that you had was the fingerprints. Now, can you tell us how and why?
Both boys were in, we live in Boone County, Kentucky, and both boys were in the public school system. And the school offered, there was a program where they offered it, I believe at the time it was called either Kid Identify or Identikid, and you could choose as the parent of a child to have their fingerprints taken. Those fingerprints were then, I mean, they had a professional come in and do fingerprinting, and those fingerprints were then given to you as a parent in case someday you might need them for something. Well,
so this was an option.
Yes.
It was your choice. You and your husband said, well, yes, let's go ahead and do this. And then you are the keeper of the fingerprints. It's not like they're, put in some
Law
file
enforcement
somewhere.
doesn't have them.
Okay.
No, they are something that they at the time was given to us, and it was just something that we put away. Again, it's not something you ever think you're going to need, but
On a piece of
it's
paper?
a card.
I'm sorry,
a
I just
card,
don't know.
Probably, a piece of cardboard about this big, with any identifying information about your place to put any identifying information about your child, and then a copy of their fingerprints on this, and they give you the envelope to keep it in, and we put it in with all of our other files at home, never thinking we'd ever have to use it.
Right, exactly. So when did the authorities ask you specifically if you had fingerprints, or did you happen to volunteer that?
They asked when they first started the investigation. They asked for anything we might have. They asked hairbrushes, toothbrushes, anything you might have that if they were to find a body, they've got DNA to identify them. And we didn't. He wasn't living with us,
right.
so we didn't have those things. And it was interesting because the police officer said, well, I'm going to ask, but you probably don't have these. He said, do you have a set of his fingerprints? And I went, well, we do. And so he was actually surprised. But I had these fingerprints in a file, and so took them out. And again, so it would have been the identifying factor if, they'd ever found.
Yes. And, I mean, isn't it interesting that through the years you kept those thinking, oh, I'm never going to need them. I mean, I would be thinking I would never need, fingerprints of my children. And then one day this happens and you do have them. And is this something that because of your experience you might recommend that people do have their children's fingerprints?
And I would. And again, I know that it's one of those things that, there's probably, I don't know statistics in my head. I'm going to say 1 in a million chance you might need these. But in our case, it was the only thing we had that was going to be the possible way of identifying Joff's body if they found, where to find him. So, it's...
So you would say,
I would definitely
why not?
do it.
Go ahead
Right.
and do it.
Yep.
And I believe you can go to any number of websites to find out about this. The FBI has a website, children's fingerprinting children. You could Google that and find out where, if you wanted to, you could be able to do this today and just put them away for future use or not, and we hope or not.
Correct.
One of the things that I think would be difficult for people hearing about this is knowing what to say to you. Can you offer me a perspective on what someone should say if they hear that a friend of theirs has a missing child? People can feel so awkward and uncomfortable not knowing how to express concern.
I think the most important thing is to communicate with an individual on whatever level. But I'm here. If you need to talk, I'm here to listen. If you just want to sit, if you just want to walk and be with somebody, but the presence of someone. You and I did talk about this briefly, but we've lost contact with a group of friends, and we know that it's because they've never known what to say. They don't want to upset you. And it's okay to be upset. It's okay for me but to know that someone cares.
Okay.
So just the presence.
It's okay if I say something to you that upsets you and make you cry. It's not like you're not going to think that I'm your friend, because you're going to be glad I'm making some effort to communicate, even though I might say something that's just doesn't really help.
But sometimes the only time that you cry is when someone brings it up and makes you cry. And makes you, and when I'm saying make, not when it happens to bring the tears that sometimes you're afraid to shed.
Okay, so is this a good thing? Let's talk personally about you, because of course everyone is different. But if I say something to you and it would make you cry, would you feel that was you having some release, or would you rather that I didn't say something that made you cry because you've been doing that?
And I'd rather have you say something that made me
You'd
cry.
rather?
I'd
Okay.
rather know that you're interested, that he's not forgotten.
Okay.
I think is another big part of a big part of that whole wanting someone to ask, wanting someone, you're not being nosy, you're not trying to hurt me. I know that, and it's okay for me and for you to cry, and it's even nicer if we can cry together.
Yes, yes, definitely. What happened? Family dynamics. There's you, your husband, you have 2 children. Now, what was the reaction with your son, your other son, when all of this was going on, and what about now?
Initially, Matt was angry, and I think I think we were all angry that maybe he disappeared on his own, maybe, and then actually, there's not a whole lot of communication, and there still isn't a whole lot of communication. And for a long time, that bothered me, but that's okay. We all handle things differently. My way to handle things is to talk about it and vent and get mad and scream and run and rage. And Matt and his father, that's not their way to do it. They're more
okay.
private. They're more,
Yes.
they don't like to share those things, and I don't know why. I think it's showing.
It's understandable. I can say that because as a cancer survivor and someone who had chemo and went through a lot of other issues with that, I didn't want to talk about it unless I wanted to talk about it. So, I would be along the lines of your son and your husband as far as if I want to talk about it, okay. And that's just the way I am, whereas I know other people who have gone through various things who want to talk about it all the time. So good for you for talking about it. Good for you for encouraging your son and husband to talk about it, and for understanding when they really didn't want to.
Well, and I think that's the most important part, is to finally come to that we're all different, and you have to appreciate and understand everyone's individual feelings.
I've read some statistics that couples can really be torn apart when something happens to a child. In your case, you feel that it has brought you and your husband closer together.
Yes.
And can you tell us, in any way you're comfortable, in what way did it bring you closer together, whereas for some people it just rips them apart?
I think going back again to the understanding, Jim understands that I'm the one who needs to do that I need to talk, and I need to vent, and I need to be that person who does that. And he is, once I accepted and appreciated that he wasn't that way, then we could mourn in our own individual ways, but together, respect each other for those things. We had a good marriage before this happened. Fortunately, he's been my rock, my godsend, I would never have made it through this without, and continue to make it through this without him. So,
well, he must be a wonderful person.
he is.
Besides being tall. He's like 6 foot what?
6'9".
6'9". That's a lot of
Well, he'd
wonderful
tell you
person.
he's a wonderful person too, though.
Now, what about your son? Your son Matt, who has a family of his own now.
Yes.
So I'm sure you're enjoying that.
Absolutely.
Is he comfortable now? Because it's been some time. Is he comfortable talking about it, or does he even talk about it very much?
He doesn't talk about it very much. Every once in a while, and it's around certain dates. So things like a birthday. Jeff's birthday is in March, and there'll be a phone call, and just, I know what this day is, Mom. And I feel the same way too. And I feel the same way too around the date of his disappearance. At the holidays. I mean, there's the recognition.
You and I are both tearing up right now.
Well, there's that recognition, but other than that, somehow I think it makes him vulnerable to open up too much. It's going to hurt too much. So he doesn't do that. I wish he would. I think it would help, whether it be me or someone else. And as far as that, maybe he does with his wife, Christina. Maybe they
Yes.
do those kinds of things. So again, I wish he'd talk with Jim and I more about it, but he doesn't. And that's okay as long as he's able to handle.
Right, that's okay. What can you tell us that are things that have helped you cope that, for example, this is the Sugar Pill Show, so I like to embrace things that make me feel good. I like to cook, I like to read, and I like to music, and I like to be with my friends. But you have cooking, which you enjoy. Obviously, if you have 1,000 recipes of what to do with apples, what else have you found has helped you that we might call a sugar pill? A non-medical thing.
Well, I think, and this is what people need. You need to find, again, something like that will help you. Gardening has always been a thing for me. My hands in the dirt. I just love being out with nature and my hands in the dirt. And I'm not the world's greatest gardener, but I love to do it. I took up running at the age of 51, and I have found that has, again, being out and just with nature, and it clears your mind and allows you to be, you're out there by yourself a lot of times, so you can be free to feel and do anything you'd like.
What made you take up running at age 51? I mean, it's not like you just one day say, I think I'll be a runner, or is that what happened?
I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. It's part of the stress will bring on amazing things, and that was part of this. We believe stress kind of made this manifest. I don't have a severe case of it, but it was something that prompted me to join a group to help support arthritis. And one thing just led to another. And seeing other people suffering at a race for arthritis, worse than I was, said, I can go out and I can do these kinds of things. And my life, in the grand scheme of things, my life is I'm pretty lucky. I'm very blessed.
So there were people. I mean, you caught my attention when you said there were people like with severe cases of arthritis.
Severe cases, fused bones.
Fused bones, and they're running races.
And they're out running races.
I love
people
it.
in their 70s and 80s, and determined that their life is not going to stop. And that's another thing with, you can make a choice to which I did for a while, let this be all-consuming.
Oh.
Let it start to destroy your life. And number one, that's not what Joff would want. It's not what I wanted. I have a son and a husband and a daughter-in-law and 2 absolutely gorgeous granddaughters that I need, and they need me too. So,
yes.
You have to find that place.
So running is helping you. I love that. Running is helping you, and the gardening, and all this cooking, and you're working, and you're you've got hubby and the rest of the family, darling grandchildren. When do you sleep? Or don't you worry about sleeping?
But all those things are the things that keep you going, and that keep my mind. For me, it's keeping my mind preoccupied. I will tell you, the first thing in the morning, my mornings are still, even after almost 15 years, mornings are difficult because I wake up and the first thing that I do think about is the fact that he's not here. Not that I don't want to think about it. So I start my day a little stressed, and then it's you have to keep going. So all these things that I do help get me through the depression, the anxiety, all the things that come along with not knowing what's happened to a loved one.
And if you were to give some advice to people who are listening, who may be going through this same thing, if you were to give them some advice of ways to cope, we know you do gardening and you like to run and you have your cooking, what would you suggest?
Find what gives you some kind of inner peace. It's going to be different for every individual. One of the most important things, and I guess again, if you're not a talker, but find someone who you can talk to, who will listen, really listen. I think that's really, really important, or it was to me. Find out what's the most important thing to you to help you get through this crisis.
Okay. And for those who are recent parents of missing children, can you give us an idea, in the 15 years that it's been since Joff has been missing, when did you turn that corner and start to say to yourself, I want to get back into living my life? Was it years and years?
A little bit at a time. The first 4 years were the most difficult. Then little by little, certain things happened in life. I lost a job. I lost a job because my attention to detail, I didn't have it anymore. I didn't lose a job because my performance I just wasn't able to be on top of what I needed to be on. It was actually a blessing in disguise because that was actually a stressor in trying to get through that.
Okay.
And about 10 years.
Wow.
And I'm not, but it was at about the 10-year, it was like...
The 10-year mark.
You just...
Helene, I want to give you the Sugar Pill book, and thank you for being here and being our guest, The Sugar Pills Non-Medical Ways. You're touching my heart with this. You really, really are. And for any of you out there who are having this same situation, Helene and I send you love, and I want you to know that we really appreciate that you've been listening here to this show, and I personally would invite any of you who know someone who's going through something like this to tell them about this show with Helene so that they can benefit from her experience and her knowledge, and think about fingerprinting your children, and remember to do things that are going to bolster you and make you feel good, and things that you love, things you love to do. And we wish you the absolute best, and thank you so much for listening to the Sugar Pills program, for seeing us, and for being concerned about anyone who has a missing child. Remember, express to them that you will always be remembering their child. Thanks so much for watching.
Shake a sugar shaker, what a thrill. Jeepers, I'm a sugar pill. Shake a sugar shaker, you can too. Sugar pills will work for you. Shake a sugar shaker, what a thrill. Jeepers, you're a sugar pill.